Tripitaka. 3 texts on consciousness only. By Xian Sang. The 30 verses on consciousness only by Vasubandhu. The treatise in 20 verses, on consciousness only by Vasubandhu. Translated from the Chinese of Xian Sang Francis H. Cook. First printing, 1999 Nanda Center for Buddhist Translation and Research. Chapter 10. The Three Natures. If there is only consciousness, why did the world-honored ones say in place after place in the scriptures that there are 3 natures, Trisvabhava? You should know that the 3 natures are also not separate from consciousness. Why? The verses, of Vasubandhu, say,
because of whatever imagination, such and such a thing is imagined. The imagined nature does not exist. The nature that is dependent on others is discrimination born of conditions. The perfected is the eternal privation of this, dependent, nature from that former imagined nature. Therefore, this and the dependent on others are neither different nor non-different. Like the nature of impermanence, etc. One not perceived, the other is not perceived.
According to Nanda, the treatise says that it is called imagination, lit. Universal conjecture, because it conjectures comprehensively. Being of various and numerous kinds, the verses say whatever. That is, it imagines comprehensively and falsely imagines. As a result of whatever false imaginations, it imagines such and such imagined things, that is, various natures of aggregates, sense bases, and sense fields, etc., that are falsely grasped as selves or dharmas. These various falsely grasped natures are all given the general name of imagined nature, parikalpita-svabhava. Such natures are absolutely non-existent, because they cannot be found through a minute investigation of either scripture or reason. Alternately, according to Dharmapala, the first quarter of the first verse shows the consciousness that imagines, and the second quarter shows the things that are imagined. The last half of the first verse then proceeds to state that the nature that is imagined, whether as a self or as dharmas, is non-existent, because it has already been explained extensively that it cannot be found.
What is the nature of that which imagines? There is an interpretation, by Sthiramati, that all 8 consciousnesses and their mental activities categorized as impure are able to imagine, for the following reasons: because they are by nature false imagination, they all appear resembling the grasped and the grasper, and it is said that the aleya, consciousness, has as its objects the falsely grasped seeds of the imagined nature.
There is an interpretation, by Dharmapala, that the classes of the 6th and 7th consciousness grasp selves and dharmas and can imagine, for the following reasons: because it is only said that mental consciousness can imagine. Both mind, manas, and mental consciousness are referred to as mental consciousness. Conjecture and discrimination can imagine. The grasping of selves and dharmas is necessarily discernment, which is absent in the store consciousness. The twofold grasping is necessarily accompanied by ignorance. It is not claimed that ignorance has a good nature. Delusion and non-delusion, etc., are not associated. We do not perceive that possessing grasping leads to the knowledge of emptiness. Grasping existence and grasping non-existence do not occur together, and that which does not grasp, i.e., aleya, is unable to perfume.
Because minds that are impure, etc., do not realize reality, all are named false imagination, even though they appear resembling that which is grasped, graya, and that which grasps, grahaka. Nevertheless, not all can be categorized as imagination, because it must not be that pure minds also have grasping, because subsequently acquired knowledge of a Tathagata would have grasping, because a scripture says that Buddha knowledge manifests numerous images such as bodies and lands, in the same way a mirror does, etc. If this knowledge has no function of having objects, it must not be knowledge, etc.
Although it is said that store consciousness has as objects the seeds of imagination, still it is not said that it only has that function, so that is not a conclusive piece of evidence. The consequence of this reasoning is that only the classes of the 6th and 7th kinds of minds have imagination. Although there are only 2 of these classes of consciousness, still there are 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, etc. imaginations, and they are not the same, and for that reason, the verses speak of whatever.
Next, what is the nature of that which is imagined? The Mahayana Samgraha says that it is that which is dependent on others, because it is the condition as object for the imagining mind, etc. Why is the perfected nature not the objective realm of that imagination? Because reality is not the objective realm for false grasping. But it is said to be imagined on the basis of its development from false imagination. Even though the imagined nature is the object of that false imagination, still it is not its condition as object, therefore, it is not really grasped.
What are the characteristics of the imagined, and how does it differ from the dependent on others? There is an interpretation, by Sthiramati, that, due to beginningless false perfuming, mind and mental activities of the three realms are born resembling two parts, even though each is unitary in substance, that is, as the seeing and seen parts, which is to say, the grasper and the grasped. Such two parts exist according to opinion but not according to reason. This characteristic is said to be imagined. The supporting substance of the two parts is real and is born in dependence on conditions. This nature is not non-existent and is called dependent on others because it is born from the condition of false imagination. How do we know that this is so? Various holy teachings say that false imagination is the dependent on others and the name of the twofold grasping is imagined.
There is an interpretation, by Dharmapala, that the two parts that are transformation of all consciousnesses and mental activities via the power of perfuming are born of conditions and therefore are also the dependent on others. It is only when imagination, on the basis of this, falsely grasps them as definitely real existence and non-existence, sameness and difference, both, of the latter two alternatives, and neither, of the alternatives, etc., that these two parts are named imagined, because various holy teachings say that only means of knowledge, only the two parts, i.e., seeing and seen, and only the variety of modes of each, are named dependent on others.
Also, 4 dharmas, such as the image, and 11 consciousnesses, etc., are categorized as the dependent on others, according to all treatises. If it were otherwise, the two parts of the class of pure subsequently acquired knowledge must be imagined. If you admit that they are, holy knowledge will not be born with seen parts as objects. If it has them as objects, then this class of knowledge must not be related to the truth of the path. If you do not admit it, then you must understand that it will be the same for impure consciousness.
Also, if the two parts are the imagined, naturel, then they must be like the horns of a rabbit, etc., and not the condition as object, because the substance of the imagined does not exist. Also, the two parts must not create and perfume seeds, and the birth of subsequent consciousnesses, etc., must be devoid of the two parts. Also, the various habit energies are categorized as the seen part. How can non-existent dharmas act as conditions as cause? If internal seen and seeing parts born of conditions are not dependent on others, then the body of the two parts must not be either, because they do not have different causes.
The consequence of this line of reasoning is that the substance of mind and mental activities, born of a host of conditions, along with the seen and seeing parts, whether impure or pure, are all the dependent on others, because they are able to arise in dependence on a host of conditions.
When the verses say discrimination born of conditions, it must be understood that this is just said of the defiled part of the dependent on others, because the pure part of the dependent on others is also the perfected parinispana. Or, the various dharmas, consisting of defiled and pure mind and mental activities, are all called discrimination in the verses, because they are capable of having objects and they perceive. Hence all defiled and pure dependent on others is categorized here, in the verses, as dependent on others.
The perfect, complete, real nature of all dharmas as revealed by the twofold emptiness is named perfected. Its name shows its universality, eternality, and the non-falseness of its substance. This excludes specific and common characteristics, space, self, etc., from the definition. Pure, conditioned, mind, apart from error is ultimate and its superior functioning is universal, and so it also has this name, of perfected.
However, at present, the verses are referring to the first kind of perfected nature, not the second one.
Its nature is the eternal privation of the former imagined nature, from that nature, which is dependent on others, the ultimate reality revealed by the twofold emptiness. When the verses say, privation of that, it indicates that the perfected and dependent on others are neither the same nor different. The words eternal privation indicate that the falsely grasped natures of the grasper and the grasped in reality never existed. The meaning of the word former shows that the perfected nature is not empty of the dependent on others. Nature indicates that the twofold emptiness is not the perfected nature, because ultimate reality is divorced from existence and divorced from non-existence by nature.
As a consequence of the above reasoning, this perfected nature and the nature that is dependent on others are neither different nor non-different. If they were different, ultimate reality would not be the real nature of that dependent on others. If they were non-different, this perfected nature would be non-eternal. Both natures would be both pure and impure realms, and then the functions of basic knowledge and subsequently acquired knowledge would be devoid of difference. Why are the two natures neither different nor the same? They are like the nature of impermanence, so no self, etc. If the nature of impermanence, etc., is different from dharmas that are impermanent, such as the karmic forces, these dharmas would not be impermanent, etc. If they are not different, impermanence, etc., would not be there.